Today on Anime Galaxy, we're going through I Became a Legend After My 10-Year-Long Last Stand. If you enjoy the video, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more recaps. The story begins inside a distorted dimensional rift, where the battle had been dragging on for months without a real end in sight. Goran, Eric, and Loki, three members of the hero's party, had been fighting non-stop against the Demon Lord and his forces. And after all that time, they finally managed to land a serious blow, cutting off one of the Demon Lord's arms and forcing him to escape for now. Goran was frustrated that they failed to finish him off completely, but an injury that severe meant the Demon Lord would not be able to attack again anytime soon. Because of that, the three of them believed they could finally breathe, leave the battlefield behind, and return home. For Eric and Goran, that thought meant everything. This fight had lasted far longer than either of them expected, and both of them had already missed precious moments with their families. Eric had even missed the birth of his own child, while Goran worried that his daughter might have already forgotten his face after being away for so long. Loki, however, had nothing like that waiting for him. He had never even had a girlfriend, much less a wife or children. His entire life had always revolved around research, so he casually admitted that he had no interest in building a family of his own. Eric and Goran told him that he should not dismiss the idea so easily, because having people waiting for you at home makes surviving a war feel far more meaningful. Unfortunately, the moment they said that, it was almost like they had cursed themselves. A massive horde of demons suddenly appeared before them, and the three warriors froze in horror after realizing there were still this many enemies left. With that many demons blocking the way, leaving the rift was no longer an option, so Eric and Goran immediately prepared themselves for a final stand, ready to fight until their bodies gave out. But Loki had already made a different decision. He might not have understood the desire to have a family for himself, but he fully understood how much Eric and Goran's families meant to them. After months of non-stop fighting, all three of them were exhausted, and the chances of everyone surviving another battle on that scale were painfully low. So Loki decided that even if he had to stay behind, he would at least make sure the other two made it back alive. He told Eric and Goran to lead the demons to him, but they instantly rejected the idea. There was no way they could abandon their friend in a place like this. Loki then reminded them that the Demon Lord was still alive. Even though they had injured him, once he recovered, the world would need the hero's power to stop him again, and that meant Eric could not afford to die here. Goran understood what Loki was trying to say, but he still refused to accept it. Eric might be the hero, but Goran was only a warrior, so in his mind, there was no reason for him to run while Loki sacrificed himself. He insisted on staying behind and fighting beside him, but Loki immediately brought up Goran's daughter and told him that she still needed her father to come home. Even after that, Eric and Goran refused to move, exactly as Loki expected. So before they could stop him, he used his magic to raise a massive wall of stone, sealing the cave entrance and cutting himself off from them. On the other side, Eric and Goran shouted desperately, telling him not to do anything reckless while they tried to break through the barrier. But no matter how hard they struggled, the wall would not give way, and while their voices echoed behind him, Loki turned toward the approaching army of demons and charged straight into the fight alone. Days passed inside the rift, and somehow, Loki was still alive, but every battle had taken another piece out of him, and his body was already approaching its limit. Then things became even worse when one of the demon generals caught him off guard and grabbed him with a skill called Drain Touch. In an instant, a huge amount of Loki's mana was ripped away, leaving him in a state where continuing the fight normally would have been impossible. But Loki had one advantage the demon general did not know about. He possessed a learning skill that allowed him to copy any ability used against him, so the moment Drain Touch affected him, Loki learned the skill for himself. He immediately turned it back on the demon general and began absorbing every bit of energy he could take, until the demon general's body dried up and crumbled into dust. With Drain Touch now in his possession, Loki finally had a real way to keep himself alive during battle, and considering the endless army still waiting ahead of him, he was definitely going to need it. From that point on, Loki's fight continued for weeks, then months, without a single true pause. After spending so long underground, he eventually lost all sense of time. Whenever his mana started running out, he grabbed another demon and drained its energy to recover. And whenever exhaustion pushed him towards sleep, he cast a spell called Marionette on himself, forcing his own body to keep moving even while his mind was unconscious. Little by little, Loki stopped resembling a normal person. He became more like a weapon that existed only to kill demons and keep moving forward. And after 10 years of endless slaughter, that insane battle was finally nearing its end. Loki had wiped out nearly the entire demon army, and now only one enemy remained in front of him, the Demon King himself. The Demon King's fire magic was far beyond ordinary, so Loki knew he needed to get close and use Drain Touch to restore some of his strength. But the Demon King had already predicted that move. The instant Loki touched him, the Demon King used magic to interrupt the skill and cancel its effect. With Drain Touch blocked, Loki lost his only reliable way to recover. If the fight continued like that, then sooner or later he would be worn down completely. The two clashed again and again, until the Demon Lord finally shattered Loki's blade. But Loki barely cared, saying that a broken weapon did not matter much to a mage. He immediately cast a Hellflame spell and sent it straight toward the Demon King. The attack managed to stun him for a brief moment, giving Loki the chance to rush in close and release another Hellflame spell directly in front of his body. This time, the Demon King defended himself with magic and held back the flames, but that was exactly the opening Loki had been waiting for. At the same time, he activated Drain Touch again. The Demon King could defend against the fire, or he could stop the draining spell, but he could not fully handle both at once. Because of that, the battle turned into a brutal contest of endurance, with Loki constantly stealing mana from the Demon King to keep his Hellflame burning. Loki had no intention of letting go, no matter how long it took. He maintained both spells for countless days, refusing to break first, until he finally drained every last drop of mana from the Demon Lord's body. After the battle finally ended, Loki slowly returned to his senses and realized the impossible had actually happened. He had defeated the Demon King. Still barely processing his victory, he picked up the Demon King's sword and celebrated the fact that he had survived after all those years of fighting. Now that the Demon King was gone, Loki could finally return home. The only problem was that he had no idea where he actually was anymore. He figured that if he followed the road long enough, he would eventually reach a town or city. But during the endless battle, he had lost his adventurer's card, his possessions, and anything else that could prove his identity. After walking for some time, Loki eventually arrived at the royal capital, and the moment he saw it, he noticed that the city looked completely different from how he remembered it, but he assumed that was not important and headed toward the entrance. However, he had completely forgotten that he was still carrying the Demon Lord's sword out in the open, so when the guards spotted him approaching with such a dangerous-looking weapon, they immediately panicked and ordered him to stop. Loki calmly obeyed and asked if there was a problem, but once the guards realized he was not acting hostile, they assumed he was just a harmless kid who did not understand how suspicious he looked. So instead of arresting him, they helped him cover the sword properly so he would not terrify everyone inside the capital, and they even gave him some spare clothes they had nearby. Loki sincerely thanked them, especially since he did not have any money to buy clothes for himself. Once he entered the city, the first thing Loki wanted to do was visit Goran and see how his old friend's family was doing. But when he reached the place where Goran used to live, he found a massive mansion standing there instead. Confused, Loki walked up to the gate and asked if he could meet Goran. The butler at the entrance politely asked whether he had an appointment, and when Loki admitted that he did not, the butler told him that meeting Goran today would be impossible. Loki then explained that Goran would probably make an exception if he knew an old friend had come to see him. But the moment the butler heard that, his attitude changed. He assumed Loki was some shameless fraud pretending to be connected to the legendary Saint Loki, so he ordered him to leave. With no way to prove who he really was, Loki had no choice but to walk away. While wandering through the capital, Loki suddenly noticed a gigantic statue standing in the city. He was sure it had not been there the last time he visited, so he stopped a random man passing by and asked who the statue was supposed to represent. At first, the man looked shocked that Loki did not recognize such an important figure, but after taking a closer look at him, he assumed Loki must be a country kid who simply never learned the story. So he explained that the statue honored the great Saint Loki, the legendary man who sacrificed himself and saved the entire world on his own. Loki stood there completely stunned. He had never imagined that, while he was trapped inside that endless battle, the entire world had turned him into a legendary figure. But the situation was not exactly good news for him. If everyone believed that Saint Loki had died 10 years ago, then proving who he really was would be almost impossible. After all, no normal person would believe that he had survived alone inside a dimensional rift and fought demons non-stop for an entire decade. Since he had no clear way to explain himself yet, Loki decided to visit the guild first and see if he could fix his adventure registration. But just as he was about to speak with the receptionist, Goran suddenly appeared. The moment he saw Loki, tears filled his eyes, and without saying much, He grabbed him and dragged him into a private room. Apparently, Goran had heard that someone claiming to know him had shown up at his mansion, so he came personally to check what was going on. And the instant he saw Loki face to face, he recognized him immediately. Goran was overwhelmed with happiness, unable to believe that his old friend had actually returned alive. Loki was happy too, but he could not help noticing how much older Goran looked now. Goran reminded him that 10 years had passed, so of course time had changed him. Then seeing how hungry Loki was, he quickly ordered food for him. Loki could barely contain his excitement when the plate arrived, because for the past 10 years he had not eaten a real meal at all. He had only kept himself alive by absorbing energy from demons, which meant his body had survived, but his stomach had been empty the entire time. The moment Goran heard that, he immediately stopped Loki before he could start eating too much. He explained that if Loki truly had not eaten solid food in 10 years, suddenly filling his stomach could be dangerous. So instead, he told his butler to bring something gentle and easy to digest, like rice gruel. A little later, the food finally arrived, but the person carrying it was not the butler, it was Eric. Loki was thrilled to see Eric again after all this time, and Eric was just as relieved to see that Loki had survived. But once the emotional reunion settled down, Eric could not ignore the strange condition Loki was in. He asked how Loki had ended up looking like that, because not only had he failed to age during the past 10 years, but he actually seemed younger than he had looked before the battle began. Loki did not understand what they meant at first, but when he checked his reflection in a mirror, he realized they were right. His appearance had changed, and he looked noticeably younger than before. And after thinking about it, he remembered absorbing a huge amount of the Demon Lord's life force during their final fight, and he guessed that must have been what reversed his age. But when Eric and Goran heard that Loki had actually defeated the Demon King, both of them froze in shock. They explained that the kingdom had spent the past decade strengthening its army and preparing for the Demon King's inevitable return. If Loki had truly killed him, then that meant the greatest threat to the world was already gone. Eric then said that, as king, he owed Loki a proper reward for what he had done. Loki was stunned when he heard Eric call himself the king. Then he remembered that Eric had once mentioned being part of the royal family. So after Eric returned from the rift, the previous king believed that his role in forcing the Demon Lord back made him worthy of the throne, so Eric was eventually crowned as the new king. Goran had also built an impressive life during those 10 years. He was now the guild master of the Adventurers Guild, which made Loki feel like both of his old companions had achieved a lot while he was gone. But Eric and Goran quickly pointed out that Loki was in no position to call himself ordinary either. In the eyes of the kingdom, he had become the great sage and the hero who saved the world. On top of that, Eric had recommended him for the title of Archduke, and the title had actually been granted. Loki was surprised that Eric managed to get the nobles to agree to something like that, especially since he remembered how much they looked down on him for being a commoner. But Eric explained that at the time, everyone believed Loki was dead, so the title had been treated more like a symbolic honor than a political problem. Hearing that made Loki wonder whether his sudden return would cause trouble among the nobles. And once Eric and Goran thought about it properly, they realized that it probably would, but Loki told them not to stress over it. He had no interest in standing in front of the public as some legendary savior, so he was perfectly fine with the kingdom continuing to treat Saint Loki as dead. Besides, he had no family or close relatives who had spent the past decade waiting for him to return. Eric then asked what Loki planned to do with his life now. So Loki answered that he wanted to begin again as an adventurer, almost like he was starting from zero. And to make that possible, Goran used his authority as guild master to prepare a special guild card for him. The card would hide Loki's true S-rank Supreme Mage class and only show him as an F-rank warrior. Then with his identity covered, Loki headed to the guild and tried to accept his first quest. However, when the receptionist Aron learned that he wanted to handle a goblin extermination alone, she immediately refused. She had watched too many new adventurers die because they thought confidence was the same thing as experience, and she was not about to let another rookie walk straight into danger by himself. Since Loki could not simply reveal that he was actually an S-rank mage, he had no choice but to accept her decision. And as a result, he was placed into a small party with two beginner adventurers named Ario and Ginny. Ario was a mage, while Ginny worked as a bow scout. Loki had originally planned to complete the job alone, but after meeting them, he decided this could be a good chance to guide the two rookies and help them gain some real experience. As the three made their way toward the quest location, Loki started learning more about his new teammates. Ginny quickly proved that she had solid scouting instincts, and thanks to her tracking, they were able to locate the goblin nest without much trouble. Once they entered the cave, the group began clearing out the goblins inside, but it did not take long for them to realize that the nest was larger than Ginny had expected, and there were far more goblins hiding inside than they had prepared for. Then from somewhere deeper in the cave, a terrifying hobgoblin scream echoed through the tunnels. Loki immediately sensed that the situation was not as simple as a normal goblin extermination. Something stronger was lurking further inside, but before he could fully identify what it was, he heard the sound of a young swordswoman charging straight toward the hobgoblin. And judging by the situation, it seems she has also come here to wipe out the goblin nest. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the recap and are excited for the next episode, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our daily recaps.